My name is Dan Dorval, and I'm President and CEO of Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. I am an independent certified financial planner and author of my book, Financial Success for the Rest of Us, Reality-Based Financial Planning for Mainstream America.
Hi, my name is Leah Woodley. I'm an associate financial advisor with Dorval and Cherney Financial Advisors. Our conversations discuss what it means to do quality of life planning in all areas of your life.
Hi, Dan. So recently, the 4% rule creator made an update to that rule. That rule has been in existence for about 30 years now, and the creator himself said it should actually be closer to 4.7% now. So, can you start off by just sharing with our audience what the full 4% rule is and why it became such a widely used tool in retirement planning?
Yeah, I mean, if you Google retirement income, you're going to run across the 4% rule almost for sure. Gentleman's name is Bill Bengen, and he did some academic studies on what is an allowable withdrawal rate adjusted for inflation that would very likely result in you not running out of money during your retirement. And he came up with a 4% withdrawal rate. And there has been a lot of back and forth and disagreement on what that rate actually meant. But in general, it was adopted by a lot of financial advisors. You will hear that referenced routinely from people who come in to meet with us. Their advisors have told them that. They've found it online. So it is a very common rule. Now, as far as like what we do, it is very different from the 4% rule. As far as we're concerned, that's just one of these general rules of thumb. I think it's well founded in the research that he has done. But at the same time, research and academia and theory is not reality. Our reality is that the people we help are all unique, and their goals and priorities and motivations are going to override any generic rules of thumb. So, in our case, what happens in most situations is people come in, they say, hey, I'm looking at retiring. Here are the resources I have available. And in many cases, their withdrawal rate is going to change and evolve throughout retirement. So for many of our clients, they start out in what we refer to as bridging. And bridging means they're retired, they no longer have income coming in from work, but maybe they haven't collected an income stream like Social Security is a common one, or maybe they have a pension and they're not collecting their pension yet. So we need to bridge them across from retirement to this new income stream. And so their withdrawal rate might be really high for several years. It might be 7, 8, 9, 10% even over a short period of time. Not their whole retirement, but over a short period of time. Now they take that income stream. So maybe Social Security's been growing. Now they take Social Security. Now they might reduce their IRA distributions or whatever it happens to be. And now they might fall below 4% going forward. So this whole idea of retirement income being like a static type of 4% rule, that just doesn't really work in practice for most of our clients.
I'm glad you mentioned that it's just a guideline, and there are a lot of guidelines out there in the financial industry. So, as you said, every person is unique, and you need to take your own unique situation into consideration when you are following these guidelines. It may not be an exact fit for you. So, one of the reasons he changed the rate was because he wanted to take into account a more diverse portfolio. So, international stocks, small and mid cap companies, along with, US stocks and bonds. So, what is the importance of having a diversified portfolio when it comes to planning for retirement?
Yeah, a lot of these studies are done with very basic information because you can access historical data for like the S&P 500, for example. It's very easy to get historical data. So if I want to do a study going back, 70, 80 years, I can get that data very easily. It is much less easy to get data for a broad array of other types of investments. So we will routinely see studies come to conclusions with a really simple portfolio. It might be have the S&P 500 and then maybe US aggregate bond or something like that. And in reality, again, with what we do for our clients is we're going to have a much more broadly diversified portfolio. We are also going to rebalance periodically. And what that does for most people is it doesn't necessarily enhance returns, although sometimes it does. What it really does is it has a tendency to reduce volatility. And volatility means that if the market goes down dramatically, like it did, maybe during the Great Recession, if we had diversification across different types of investments, we're going to experience a much less decline in our portfolio, which means it's much easier for us to come back when the market ultimately rebounds and comes back. So your volatility, especially downside volatility, is not your friend when you are retired and taking out income. Now, in this case, what he showed is basically having a more broadly diversified portfolio means your volatility has likely been reduced. And so those declines are just not as severe as they might have been in a less diversified portfolio. That means your withdrawal rate can be a little bit higher without impacting your sustainability over a potentially long retirement.
Right. So portfolio design makes a big difference. There's another factor he really emphasized, and that was inflation. He called it the greatest enemy of retirees. How should people think about inflation when planning their withdrawals? Is that something that should come into play or not?
Well, to some extent, this is where I might disagree a little bit. And that is, we don't know for sure what inflation is going to do in the future. We could have a period of very high inflation. Maybe it'll be a sustained period of very low inflation. We just simply don't know that answer. So we can use averages from historical averages, but now you're back to, essentially a rule of thumb that may or may not, represent what happens in the future. So what we see in reality is a lot of advisors talk about inflation, calculators account for inflation, but most of our clients, what they do is they spend the most money when they are young and healthy and able to spend money, which tends to be right when they retire. So it's their 60s, maybe their early 70s. And then as they get older, they have a tendency to do less stuff. And when they do less stuff, their discretionary expenditures don't increase with inflation. In fact, in many cases, they will decrease over time. Plus, they might pay off their mortgage or they might pay off other debts. They might have, less inclination to spend on things they used to spend on. And so realistically, in like 2002, I'm going to use an example. 2022. In 2022, we had a lot of inflation. There was an 8.5% inflation rate. And we all kind of felt that, right? Like there was groceries were more expensive, gas was more expensive. We were all feeling it. And yet at the same time, we have hundreds of retired clients. And literally none of those clients came to us and said, hey, I need an 8.5% increase on my retirement income because that's what inflation is. And so we see this in the real world that most people, if they have accounted for travel and other discretionary expenditures, uh, it just doesn't mean that they're going to automatically spend more just because there's inflation. So for most of our clients, it's more of a level type of expenditure. And then they might have a big expense that changes and they might have a jump. So, maybe they took on a new asset or something that requires maintenance and there's a new payment that might account for a jump. But inflation in general, it just doesn't affect people the way theoretical assumptions work.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that. That goes back to everybody's situation is unique, and we can't always get caught up in the noise that we hear out there, especially when it comes to inflation. So thank you for clarifying that for us. And thank you for breaking down the 4% rule as people head into retirement. Is there anything else you want to add?
Well, going to the inflation thing, just think about it. If you have a mortgage on your house and, even in retirement, that mortgage payment doesn't change. Now, your property taxes might change, your homeowner's insurance might change. That's actually gone up a lot in recent years. But your mortgage is fixed, so you don't automatically experience the same inflation. Like if your mortgage is a primary expense for you, you're not going to experience inflation the way somebody else who maybe is renting. They might have a lot of inflation associated with their housing. So generic assumptions and rules of thumb, they're beneficial. They're actually more beneficial for advisors to just kind of understand how things work. But we always have to question whether you fit the mold of that rule of thumb.
Absolutely. I definitely think that the rule of thumb just serves as a baseline, and then you need to frame it towards your unique situation. Well, thank you for sharing with us. I hope this is helpful to our viewers. And until next time, have a great one.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.